We'll go ahead and get started. We've got several people already logged in and registered and ready to go. So
Perfect.
Welcome to today's webinar, VA Loans 101 for Realtors with Daniel Lehman. And this is being recorded and you can view it later at www.nsdcartv.com. In the meantime, I'm going to turn it over to Daniel.
Hey, how are you guys doing? So I wanted to just double check real quick that everybody can hear us and everything's clear and everything. Just do like a quick technical check on everything. So if you guys can hear me okay, and if you can see my screen okay, if you can see my PowerPoint okay, if you could jump in the chat and just let me know that everything looks good. Sweet, sounds good, good deal. All right, cool. So yeah, so thanks for coming out today. I'm going to try to get through it. It's a good amount of information. Hopefully it's useful information. I'm going to try to get through it as quick as possible. But also if you have questions or anything just doesn't make sense, just pop into the chat and I'll probably interact with you quite a bit in the chat. I don't just talking for extended periods of time without stopping and just making sure some of this stuff makes sense. But I'm going to try to keep all the questions that are super, super in depth to the end. So you can ask me whatever you need and I can let you know if that information's still coming. So without any further ado, we can kind of get started. But to keep it on track too, I want to always make sure that I have a real clear picture of kind of what everybody's trying to get out of it. So if anybody wants to, if you could jump in and if there's anything specifically you want to learn or any objectives that you have, or are you trying to do more business with veterans? Are you new to the business? Are you just looking for a refresher? If you could jump in and kind of let me know what specifically I can kind of, so I just lead the discussion in the right direction, that'd be super helpful for me. New to business? Thanks, Kim. So that's good. So a lot of that, so Kim, so a lot of do more business with veterans. Perfect. So Kim, a lot of the stuff that we're going to do, the VA loan is just a loan type that kind of lands on and so for Rita also, it's kind of it's a loan type that is foundationally very similar to the other loan types. So it's just a little bit of tweaks. So if you understand, I'm going to go through a baseline understanding of kind of how loans work, generally speaking, some loan concepts, and we build on VA from that. So hopefully that's helpful. Rosemary, refresher, do more business with veterans. Perfect. Love it. Sounds good. Okay, cool. So, all right. So we'll just kind of jump into it. What's new since pandemic? What are you seeing? Okay, cool. So we can go over that too, Barb. Okay. So, first of all, I just want to go over what San Diego looks like in terms of the demographics. If you know, like Rosemary was saying, if you want to do more business with veterans, it's kind of good to have an understanding, a clear picture of kind of what the demographics look like. And then for Kim and for Rita, for any of the newer agents that it's important to have, and we do this with all of our clients too, it's important to have a foundational understanding of some basic loan concepts so that you understand kind of how the VA loan works on top of that. And then there are some VA loan specifics that you're going to want to know as a realtor that you're going to want to keep in mind that's specific to VA that we'll go over. So I got out of the Marine Corps in 2004. I started the Lehman Group in 2004. I wrote that book back there, the VA Home Loans book. It's ugly because it looks like a field manual. So we distribute those in terms of educating. Most of our function is educating veterans and military families on the home loan benefit and budgeting and entrepreneurship and that kind of thing, because that's what I benefited from personally when I got out of the Marine Corps was entrepreneurship, budgeting, and home ownership. So we're very passionate about it. This is me back then in the Marine Corps. That's me pre-beard, but that was actually a while ago now. But that's our house in Carlsbad. We have on a VA loan too, which has been fantastic. So, all right. So real quick, the San Diego military landscape. Okay, so San Diego has 7 major military bases. There's a big military presence in San Diego, obviously, as you guys have spent, if you spent any time here. There's a Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard. There's small amounts of Army, not much Air Force or anything like that. The vast majority is Navy and Marine Corps, and there's a small Coast Guard base. There's some reservists and stuff like that. But the vast majority that you're going to run into here is Navy and Marine Corps. Marine Corps is in the Department of the Navy. But yeah, so ideas on how many active military members are in San Diego. Anybody got any guesses? Anybody brave? 30,000, Rita says. Okay, anybody else? $100,000, good guess, okay. So Rosemary, that's pretty darn close. There's about 110,000 uniformed military. That might be up because my stats are like potentially a little bit older, like maybe a couple years old. But so we've been doing these for a long time, but so I should probably just double check that, but that's in the range. There's over 100,000. And then if you include family members, you've got 230,000 people, 7.6% of San Diego County's population at the time that I had the statistics were military or military connected. So first service, like I was mentioning, was the Navy. The Navy, there's 3 major military bases. They're mainly down south. It's Coronado, 32nd Street, you know, Nave, San Diego. And then there's Point Loma, which is one of the most beautiful bases, period, anywhere. Absolutely gorgeous. So those are the 3 major Navy bases. And I failed to mention, 1/6 of the Navy is in San Diego. So of all the Navy in the U.S., 1/6 of it is in San Diego, which is pretty cool. San Diego is 1/4 of the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is a smaller service than the Navy, but there's 1/4 of it in San Diego. So they're the major bases, as you guys would well know, as you listen to the artillery hit some evenings. Camp Pendleton is super close to us. Miramar is the air station. Used to be NAS Miramar, which was like a naval air station. That's where they did Top Gun and stuff. And then they moved people down from El Toro to Miramar several years ago, a long time ago now. And then MCRD San Diego is where all the recruits go out. So there's the yellow buildings by the airport. That's where a good chunk, half of the recruits that come through. All the male recruits come through San Diego, and all the male recruits west of the Mississippi River come to San Diego. Anybody else goes to Parris Island, and all female recruits go to Parris Island. And then there's a Coast Guard contingent in downtown, kind of by the airport, and those guys are amazing. They're pulling drugs out of the water. They're pulling people out of bad seas. They're doing environmental stuff. They're always doing something, and it's really, really cool if you ever get a chance to kind of look into what the Coast Guard does. We don't run into a ton of Coast Guard because there's only a few hundred people in San Diego, and the Coast Guard, or the base, the footprint isn't gigantic, and it's mainly down south, but it's pretty cool. Great service. So 110 active duty, average stay at a duty station is like 3 to 4 years. So if somebody comes into Pendleton, generally speaking, they're staying for about 3-4 years. So it gives a unique opportunity to have a specialized knowledge and to point to specialized knowledge as an agent, because in essence, what you're looking at is different concerns. If I'm a Marine coming into Pendleton and I'm interested in buying, one of my main concerns is going to be, okay, what happens if I deploy in 3 years, or if I PCS out in 3 years? That changes how you communicate and the strategy you go through in terms of property management or selling or an area where it's likely to not lose money right in the next 3 years. It's going to be a different kind of thing to at least consider, have an answer for. But it also opens up opportunities where people buy and then they either do property management, or they buy and then they sell later on. So if you take good care of your clients, there's a built-in kind of a long-term book of business. And if you take good care of military members and veterans, they refer quite a bit, and that's a good thing too, if you show that you take good care of them, and that's that. So and eligible active military members receive tax-free income to pay for housing. It's called Basic Allowance for Housing. So BAH or BAS. Or BAS is a basic allowance for food. Basically, it's not much, but basic allowance for housing is a good chunk. And this is our BAH chart. I'll answer it. So Barb, the Coast Guard can access VA loans. They're part of the Department of Homeland Security now. They used to be Department of Defense. I think they're Department of Homeland Security now, but VA loans are accessible to Coast Guard. So this is a chart that I use in my consumer seminars, my consumer workshops, or my consumer webinars. It basically shows the monthly BAH in the first column for each rank, that E1 through 4, E5, E6, E7, E8. Those are different ranks. O are officer ranks, enlisted ranks, and officer ranks. So if you look, say you're a staff sergeant, you're getting $3,183 a month for housing. That's $38,000. If you live on base, it just goes straight to base housing in most cases. So that's $114,000 that's lost, that just goes, that you don't get. So there's a cost and a risk of buying, which I always point out to my clients, but there's also a cost and a risk of not buying, the opportunity cost. And you're guaranteed to lose that money if you don't buy. So that's another thing that we kind of talk about quite a bit. So let's talk about veterans real quick. That's basically like active military. How many veterans call San Diego home? Any guesses? Active military was about 110 veterans who are outside of the service now, like myself. $300,000, good guess. 2.5 mil. Woo! It's a lot of veterans. 250,000. Close. Decimal point. A couple decimal points off, but that's a yeah, good guess. It's 250,000 veterans call San Diego home. 40% of those live in North County, and San Diego is the largest county in the U.S., or the third largest county for all veterans. Los Angeles County and Maricopa County are the other two that are gigantic. But San Diego is the largest for post 9/11 veterans like myself. So Iraq and Afghanistan era veterans, we have the most of us in the country is in San Diego County. And then I'll just jam through these. About 15,000 people leave the military, and about 7,500 of them stay in San Diego. So 15,000 get out every year. Out of the 15,000, about 7,500 stay. And then real quick, I'll just blow through this. Veterans have 42.9% of veterans have some college or an associate's degree, and 35.6 have a bachelor's degree or higher. And that's higher than San Diego averages. A lot of large companies look for veteran, and there's big pushes for hiring veterans and that kind of thing. So they're great clients. They have great income sources. And so that's that. So in essence, we got 250,000 veterans, 7,500 a year getting out and staying. Veterans are educated at a higher level, generally speaking, than the general population, and they have skills that transition to highly sought after jobs. So these are great potential clients for you. And there's a large benefit to home ownership versus renting. This is another chart that we'll go through with our clients, not our clients, but with our seminar attendees for consumers. It's just the difference between home ownership and renters over time through a Federal Reserve study. It makes a massive difference. So let's get into the nuts and bolts. There's so the first section is really a home loans 101. So for the newer agents, what I want to do is lay a foundation of home loans, and then we can get into the VA loans specifically, and that kind of rides on top of basic home loan fundamentals. And for some of you, it may be elementary, or it may be just a review of what you already know, and that's totally fine too. But in lending period, don't overthink it in terms of like associating it with just VA, but there are only three main characteristics that we'll look at from a consumer standpoint. So from the client standpoint, there's only three things we'll look at. We'll look at their credit, we'll look at their income, and we'll look at their assets. CIA. Credit, income, and assets are fundamentally what we're reviewing when we review a client. Once you get into escrow, you review the property, obviously, and that kind of thing, and value and quality of the property. But that's the property from a client standpoint. So specifically when we're doing pre-approvals, we're looking at credit, income, and assets. From credit, income, and assets, you get two major lending concepts that you've probably heard of, and that's debt to income ratio, debt to income, and loan to value. So I just want to like briefly go over these things real quick. From a credit standpoint, and again, if you guys have questions, just pop them in. From a credit standpoint, the lender, us, are going to be looking at two specific things. We're going to be looking at the FICO score itself, you know, the credit score, how high is the credit score? And again, just generally speaking, loans generally speaking. And we're mainly looking at the monthly debt. We're going to look to see if there's no foreclosures, if there's, you know, no things that are disqualifying per se, but we're going to look at the monthly debt, which is used when we're calculating the debt to income to calculate the maximum that they're available that they're qualified for. So the fundamental two main things are FICO score and monthly debt. Income. So income is the key factor in figuring out how much one qualifies for. Obviously, if you have more income, you have more disposable income. If you have more disposable income, you have more ability to pay a higher payment, therefore purchase a bigger property or a more expensive property. Income has to have a history, but it just has to be industry history. It doesn't have to be job history. In other words, if someone gets a job tomorrow and they're salaried, we can use that all day long as we could show that they've been in a similar job. It doesn't, and you don't want to second guess this and say, oh, well, you just got your job and it's a total different industry, so dang, we can't do anything. You always want to have lenders take a look at it. You always want to have, I should say, creative lenders take a look at it, because what ends up happening inevitably is that you can make a connection. You know, we have some funny examples of, you know, I had a guy that worked at a funeral home and then he worked at a bakery, and the connection that we made was delivery. So he delivered the bread and he delivered people. It's creepy, but that's kind of how we made that connection. They're two completely different things, but we were able to tie those two together. Obviously, from a military standpoint, if somebody gets out of the military and they've been, you know, a mortarman shooting mortars or an infantryman, and they get into something else, we can tie in the fact that they were managers of people, or they were maybe a non-commissioned officer or something like that. So we can tie those together usually. So don't think that just because someone has a new job, they can't do it. The job has to be likely to continue, and it has to be documented, obviously, existence of the job and the amount. Any variable income like business income or bonuses or that kind of thing are average. So we have to take an average. Any fixed income like a salary is not. So if somebody comes out of a business and gets a job in the same industry and it's $100,000 a year, we can use that off the bat. We don't have to average any kind of full-time or salaried income. Can they get an advance on BAH? So BAH is an income and it's a consistent income. There's no means by which they can get an advance, because obviously they need the income to qualify to make the payments monthly. But down payment wise, we can talk about it, but most people, 99% of people that do a VA loan don't put a down payment, and any down payment that they put is strategic, and it's because they've saved it over time already. So there's no real means by which you can do an advance on a BH. But a lot of times you don't need cash saved for a VA. Yeah. So, and then assets, you guys know what assets are. Bank accounts, assets. They're not always necessary. Like I was just mentioning, you don't need a down payment in most cases. And you don't, and you can get closing costs covered by the seller if you wanted to. So that's a way that you can get someone in for no cash at all. I know that's funky in the market right now. It's very difficult. But when we need assets, we get a couple months statements, but that's not a big issue. So those things represent debt to income ratio. Debt to income ratio is basically everything from a strategic standpoint. Debt to income is basically gross monthly income plus monthly debt divided into income. And that's all you really have to know. If I have a $3,000 house payment, prospective house payment, the new house, and I have $2,000 worth of car payments, credit cards, and everything else, that's $5,000. If I have $10,000 in income, that's a 50%, 5,000 divided into 10,000, 50% debt to income ratio. And that is the key factor if you understand debt to income, and we'll run through it. But if you understand debt to income ratio, you kind of understand everything. And again, the ratio is house payment plus debt divided into gross income will give you that debt to income ratio. And different loan types have different maximums, which again, we'll spend some time going through. And the last thing is, the last concept is just conceptually, and you guys probably all understand this too, is loan to value. So loan amount divided into the value of the home gives you loan to value. And that basically represents the lender's risk on the file. And that will be what I'll show you kind of with VA in terms of how the VA solves the bank's risk problem in terms of doing zero down. Obviously, just to not beat a dead horse, but 20% down payment on a home is an 80% loan to value because they've got that 20% value. So I want to like pause there real quick before we get into VA, and just knowing that Home Loans 101 is very, very generic just to lay the groundwork. Does anybody have any questions about any of that stuff? Or if you could give me like a thumbs up or yeah, I'm good to go, kind of tracking everything's okay. Good. Barb's good. Okay, good. Okay, cool. All right. So let's dive into the VA loan specifically, and then I can actually run like a sample scenario for you and we can solve some problems. So this will be kind of the nitty gritty. So the VA loan is not provided by the VA. The VA doesn't do any lending. Traditional banks like ourselves or Chase, Wells Fargo, Navy Fed, USAA, any of those places, traditional banks and lenders do the loans. What the VA does is do a guarantee on the loans. They find out whether the veteran is eligible for it, and we'll talk about eligibility, and then they guarantee the loan. Before 2020, before January of 2020, they would only guarantee the loan up to the county loan limit. That changed in January 1st, 2020. Now they'll go up to whatever the client qualifies for, because there's a difference between what the client qualifies for and what they're eligible for. Eligibility comes from military service. Qualification comes from a combination of income and debt and all this good stuff that we were talking about before. So there was a massive change that actually opens up a whole new market, honestly, for clients to purchase using VA loans in much higher areas, because there's no loan limit anymore. We have right now that closed, well, I guess we don't have it anymore. It closed yesterday, which this is not typical. So I don't want to make it seem like this is something typical that we do all the time, although we've been getting a lot more requests. We had a house in Los Angeles. The guy was a veteran who was, I guess, well, his wife was an anesthesiologist in the Navy. She got out as an anesthesiologist. He's a brain surgeon, so they qualify for a lot. But they bought a $2.3 million house with zero down at 2.75% on a 30-year fix using VA loan with no down payment. Crazy. So that was, so that's an example of, again, the VA loan limit is gone. As long as the income and debt and everything line up, you can go up to whatever you want. Yeah, holy cows, right? I was surprised. So the only, like I said, the only caveat is you have to have all of your eligibility. If you have another property on the VA loan, and we can get into this a little bit, then it limits what you can do, because you obviously can't travel the country buying $2 million properties on your VA. So we'll get into that a little bit more. But let's talk about eligibility real quick. Eligibility is 90 days active duty during wartime. So if you're in active duty during wartime, which is any time after 9/11, you'll be eligible. If you're 181 days active duty during peacetime, which isn't super relevant right now, although it is for a lot of the older veterans. If you have 6 years reserve service, meaning you're a reservist, you're kind of like go on the 1 weekend a month kind of thing. Or let's say you were a reservist and then something popped off and you had to go out for 90 days or more and you're activated, then you're eligible. You have to have, you can't have a dishonorable discharge or anything like that. You have to have an acceptable discharge level. And the last thing is, if someone's a spouse, and again, we have one like this right now, unfortunately. So we had a service member pass away, and it wasn't in service. It was as a result of a disability that they got while they were in the service. In those circumstances, there are some caveats related to remarriage and stuff like that, but the service member's spouse can continue to use the VA loan under those circumstances. So that's not typical, but it does happen. So who can use the VA loan? This is a question we get a lot. So The veteran themselves, and when I say veteran, active duty and veteran for me are, I mean, I guess I just use those statements kind of interchangeably. Veteran can use it. The veteran and his or her spouse. So the veteran and the spouse can use the VA loan. The spouse can't alone, you know, outside of the circumstance we already talked about, without the veteran on it, right? So the veteran has to be on it, but the spouse can go on it. A veteran and another eligible veteran. So let's say, so we just had one last month where there was a veteran and a guy who was active duty, but they're really good friends and they live together renting a place now, or they rented a place anyways, and they wanted to go in and buy a property together. They can go in together, but only because they're both veterans. So without them both being veterans, that would be a no-go, but because they're both veterans, that's how that works. A veteran and a non-veteran is a funky one, and it has a ton of caveats. It's like if you have a well-documented relationship with like a fiance or someone who's very, very, very close in relationship to you, but you just don't happen to be married. You can do it, but you need a down payment. You need to, I mean, imagine being an agent on a file. You've got a listing and someone comes in with a non-veteran, and I tell you the file has to be sent to VA for a 30-day review before it closes after we underwrite it. It's like, or before it needs prior approval, which is an absolute nightmare. So it doesn't happen much, only under very, very, very strange circumstances. And then again, the widowed spouse of a service member who passed away in service or due to a service-connected disability. Real quick, and I'll answer these questions. Notice who's not on here. We have clients ask, hey, can I go on with my parents? Can I buy a house and go on with my dad? Well, if your dad's a veteran, yes, that falls under the dual eligibility. You can both go on. But if your dad is just a cosigner like a conventional or an FHA or anything else, they can't go on. It has to be a veteran and another eligible veteran, or it has to be a veteran and a spouse. Can I go on with my brother? If your brother's a veteran, sure. If your brother's not a veteran, So that's kind of how that works. And I've got some questions real quick. So when you say they can continue to use the loan, do they have a loan? Okay, so hold on, Rita. So when you say they can continue to use the loan, do they have to already have the loan, or do you mean they will be able to get a new VA loan? I missed what I was saying. I'm sorry. Hey, Rita, if you could reiterate kind of what your question is. You say continue to, I'll try to figure that out and I'll answer in a second. Can a non-veteran be an adult, working adult? Sorry, Rosemary, I don't know what that means either. Can a non-veteran, veteran and a non-veteran, related to who can use it? Usually the non-veteran in those circumstances are very, like our domestic partnerships or fiancés, long-term fiancés. And then you also need a 12.5% down payment in that case, in most cases. So that doesn't happen much. The non-veteran thing doesn't happen much at all because, again, you know, you have to send it actually to VA, which isn't the case with most VA loans. So it doesn't happen a ton, but the non-veteran has to be a very, very close documented relationship. An adult child. So, for the non-veteran, probably not. My understanding of it and my experience with it is most of the time it's people that are basically married in practice but not in reality. That's my experience with it. So is CalVet the same as a VA loan? It's not. CalVet does VA loan. So the CalVet, all they do is they do a VA loan, but CalVet, I basically fill out a form, I send it to CalVet, and then you've got the state of California running your loan for you, and that's not fun. And the reason why you would go CalVet previously is their rates were good, and they let you go up to like 800,000 when we were capped at 7-something. And so so I've had a CalVet one go through, but now after January 2020, I see no utility in the CalVet loan personally. Maybe if someone's VA is tied up and they got some funky other thing going on. But I see no utility in CalVet. And from, again, just like a joint loan, from a logistics standpoint, if someone ever writes you a CalVet offer on a listing that you have, you know, I hope you got a good period of time to wait for them, because it's literally someone sitting in office at the state of California doing these loans, and that's not always the most let's say efficient way to do things. Currently, my son and I live in the same house on a joint loan. He's a veteran. We thought we could not get a VA loan. So he's a veteran. If he's a veteran, you can get a VA loan, the Rita. So if he's a veteran, but we would have to use his income solely. We wouldn't be able to put you on the loan. My son and I live on the same house on a joint loan. I'm guessing that's like a conventional or an FHA or something outside of VA. Rita, email me after and I can like answer this question better. I'm just like not getting it super well. So if he's a veteran, he can do a VA loan all day long, and if his income qualifies for what you need, if he would not qualify without my income, well, then what we would do is probably, in your case, we would structure something differently that was outside of a VA loan. VA is not always the best way to go too. It's just, a lot of times it is, but if you wouldn't qualify without your income and you're not a veteran, it's very, very, very difficult to do. Can principal be paid? Yeah. So there's no prepayment penalties, or you can pay off VA loans, no problem, quickly. So I'm gonna keep rolling. And then we'll go questions at the end too. I got about halfway through. So, all right. So prior to 2020, VA limited 100% financing. They limited what you could do with no down payment to loan limits. And below, I have 2018 on there still. That's not 2018. That's 2020. I got to change that number, but it's relatively, it's not super, super relevant now, because again, if you have full eligibility, in other words, if you don't have a house on a VA loan now, you can go up to whatever you want. There's no loan limit with zero down. It used to be you'd have to put a down payment equal to a percentage above the loan limit. Now there's no loan limit if you have full eligibility. Let's say someone owns a property in Virginia on a VA loan and now they want to buy in San Diego, then these loan limits exist. Then these loan limits are relevant. So sorry, yeah, that 2018 is incorrect. But I also, if you look at that 510-400 down there, 510-400 is the nationwide conforming loan limit. So that's the true conforming loan limit. San Diego's loan limits are high balance because we're a higher cost area, Orange County as well. Riverside just doesn't hit that threshold. So the loan limit's 510-400. Generally speaking, and also I say 99% of the time, if you have a loan or a purchase price or a loan amount, a loan amount under 510, I shouldn't say purchase price, let me back up. If you have a loan amount under 510-400, your interest rate is going to be like 1/4 to 0.5% better than if it's over 510-400. High balance loans have an add. So a lot of times, let's say you've got a client and you send them to us and they're in escrow for 520. One of the things I'm going to ask them primarily is like, look, does it make sense to put a small down payment down just to get the loan down under 510-400? Because there's some big benefits to being under 510-400 in the sense that the rates are better on the conforming side than on the high balance side, because in San Diego, you can loan to one person, whereas in Kansas, they can loan to 20 people with the same loan, same amount. So there's that risk is factored into the higher, and there's a bunch more complexities to it, but that's the gist. So don't worry about this too much. But it was a Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Act. So if you have full eligibility, in other words, if you don't have a VA loan now, you don't have a loan limit at all, eligibility wise, you still have to qualify using your income and debt and stuff. So VA versus the other loan options, this is something we go through a lot with clients with every single consult that we do, is generally speaking, I know some of you guys are going to beat me up on this. VA from a loan standpoint, generally speaking, if you can go VA, you go VA. If you can't go VA, you go conventional. Only if you can't go conventional do you go FHA. FHA ends up being a stepping stone for conventional. Any FHA loan we do, the mortgage insurance on FHA is permanent. So we always want to look at, so even if their rate is 3.5%, 3%, With the mortgage insurance, it's closer to 5%. So we always want to make sure that we're putting a plan together where FHA turns into conventional later at a, we put that game plan together. But if you can't do anything else and you have to go FHA, that's still better than throwing your money away renting if you're going to be in a place for a long period of time. I don't want to make this super, super complex. So I want to talk about just VA versus conventional real quick, just to kind of underline it. So VA, generally speaking, because it works differently, runs about 1/4 to 1/2% cheaper in interest rate. So interest rates are generally lower with VA than with conventional. VA clients are less impacted by credit imperfections than conventional clients. With conventional clients, if you got a 740 plus, you're golden. 720, you start getting hit. 700, you start getting hit. Worse. 680, worse. 660, you start to be like, forget about it. That's when you kind of jump to FHA. But VA, whether you've got a 640 or an 840, it's really not a big deal. It's not a big difference. So they don't hammer you for credit imperfections, which is good. From an income standpoint, VA gets a DU approval, or in other words, an automated approval, because DU isn't a DTI loan per se, it's a residual income loan, which I'll show you in a second. But DU approves it up to like 60%, pending everything else looks good. Conventionals max out, generally we do them around 45 to maybe pushing it at 50%. So it allows more flexibility in terms of the payment that you can have with VA. Even if you don't use it, just because you qualify for more, obviously doesn't mean that you buy more or your client buys more. It gives you a lot more flexibility. Like again, in Rosemary's or, oh no, Rita's situation. In Rita's situation, if your son had a sufficient income on his own to where you could go up to 60%, you may not need that income to qualify, whereas conventional, it would really limit it a lot more. That's probably a bad example, but that's an example. Sometimes we have a spouse that has very complex income to use to qualify. So we'll just take that spouse off, leave her on title or him on title, and we'll just use the simple income, keep the veteran on, and it gives us more flexibility to do that. Okay, here's how VA works in a nutshell. Here's what the VA guarantee is. All banks require 20% safety. I didn't say 20% down, I'm saying 20% safety. So what that means is, the reason why the misconception is that we need 20% down is 20% down is what you need with a bank for them to feel safe. And if you don't put 20% down, they'll make you take out a mortgage insurance premium, right? And you guys all know what that is, which adds a payment, and that insurance covers the difference. So that's how conventional works, right? If they put 5% down, you get a mortgage insurance premium for the remaining amount. So it makes up it covers the 25% that the bank needs to feel comfortable. The only way that the VA works, or the way that the VA works, is the VA, based on eligibility, they do a guarantee of 25%. So they don't actually put a down payment, but because they tell the bank, look, if this client doesn't make their payments, or if they have an issue, we are doing a government guarantee. So if they don't pay, we'll pay you back. So do the loan for them. So they do a 25% guarantee. Part of the reason rates are better is because they only have 75% exposure, 25%. So you don't need mortgage insurance because the VA's got it covered. You don't need 20% down. So that's why you don't need a down payment with VA loans. I'm going to stop a second, just make sure all that stuff makes sense, if that's cool, and make sure nobody has any questions about that, because that's a lot. So between the DTI thing and how VA works, if anybody have any questions, or if not, just tell me good. We can keep cruising. Cool. Good. Okay. Good. All right. Thanks, Jillian. Yep. I'll send it. Yeah. I'll send you my email, and it's at the end of the slide. Also, yeah, I'll get the slides out, and I'll get the notes out and all that stuff through Shirley, and then and all that stuff has like contact info if you want to follow up on with questions, or if you need anything from me. Okay, so in summary, less restrictive credit, lower interest rates, no down payment, no monthly mortgage insurance expense, and more flexible debt to income limits. So in most cases, VA is the best way to go. In most cases. So let's do a sample. This is how I would take a sample pre-approval from a client. So I'm going to use a Marine Corps sergeant. This is active, like actual income. It may have, again, that's maybe 2019 figures, but it'll be the same. So 6 years time in service. I'm saying he's an active duty Marine with dependents. The reason why with dependents is important is because they get higher BAH with dependents than without. So those are the figures I'm using. I'm calling it a $350 a month car payment. I'm calling it $100 a month in minimum credit card payments. So maybe there's like $25 minimum payments on 4 credit cards. So that's just what I'm using for our figures. So here's the income. I've got a total income of $62.15 between base pay for a sergeant, basic allowance for housing, $25.92, and basic allowance for sustenance, $369 a month. So that, again, those figures may be outdated, but I don't want to go through and like do all the math. It's not super relevant. It just changes a little bit. But total income per month is $62.15. So if I'm doing a pre-approval, I've got total income. If you go from right to left, I don't know if you can see can you guys see this arrow? Or is that like, I can't tell how this is coming through. Okay, cool. So here's our income. That's 100% of the income. Remember I told you with VA, 60% is about the max that you'll get in an automated way. So if I take, so the way that debt to income works is prospective house payment plus monthly debt, remember the car payment and the credit cards, divided into the income is our debt to income ratio. So if I work backwards from 62.15, take 60% of it and subtract 450, that'll give me my max payment, and that'll apply to a max purchase price. So hopefully that makes sense, and I can kind of walk you through it. So solving for X here, once you understand the equation, gives you your max purchase price or max payment per month. That applies to whatever property, depending on HOA and stuff like that. So here's how that looks. $62.15 a month gross income. 60% of that is $37.29 for house and debt. So if I want to strip out debt to find out what house would be, I just have to subtract this 450. So 37.29 minus 450 is 32.79. So this client would qualify for a house payment maximum of 32.79. In this case, that's the equation. Depending on interest rates, again, interest rates are way lower, so it'd probably be a little bit higher than this in this circumstance, but that's about $550,000 conservatively. So that equates to that. So that includes obviously the elements of the payment would be principal and interest, taxes, insurance, and we have to be careful of HOA and Melrose because that does go into it. So sometimes, so we'll always do our pre-approvals very conservatively, because if we put the lowest rate possible and the lowest tax amount and the lowest insurance and no HOA, no, it's like, then you're playing with fire, because if the market shifts a little bit, where you're done. And that's not good. And I don't want to set the wrong expectations for the client. So if we anticipate higher payments and when they get into escrow it's lower, it always makes things a lot smoother. So that's your PITI number. It's about 550. So knowing what we know about that, let's say the client's qualified for 550 but you find the dream home for 575. What options do we have? And this is so here's back to this equation. Client is qualified for 550. They find one for 575, or they find one with an HOA and they love it. They want it. What options do we have? We have 2 options. Any guesses related to this equation? Anything? Any brave souls? Down payment's a good guess. So down payment would be one of the options, not specifically down payment, but what does down payment represent? It represents reducing debt. So we can either reduce debt, right? So putting a down payment would reduce this. What would also reduce this? We could pay off debt, right? So we could pay off one of those cards or 2 of those cards and reduce debt here would allow for more here. So reducing debt is one side. What's the other side of this equation? Income. So we could also increase income to qualify for more. So those are the two things. We can increase income or we can decrease debt. If you increase income, some ways to do that is like, for example, basic allowance for housing is tax-free. So I can show it as more income than it is because we're using gross income and it's tax-free. I can add the spouse, you know, I could add any other kind of like income. If I'm just using base pay, I can add the CPay, I can add other things. So if you can either increase income or decrease debt. Now, I have a lot of clients that are getting out of the military and they know what house they want to buy, but they don't know what income they need and they don't have a job yet. They're saying, hey, if I get an income of this amount, how much would I qualify for? Or how much would I have to make when I get to, you know, my job to be able to qualify for what I want? And in that case, when you understand this calculation, you can take the payment, add the debt, divide it by 60% and solve for how much income someone would have to make. So the point is, what we can do in terms of, and most of the stuff that I do, some of the work that I do is just loans get screwed up and we have to figure out what happened. And it's just about being creative and being knowledgeable on how we can manipulate this. I don't want to say manipulate, that implies that it's wrong. How we can facilitate making this debt to income ratio work, as opposed to most lenders that just throw stuff against the wall and hope it works. We can do a lot of planning work. This is also, if you have self-employed borrowers, how much do I have to write off on taxes to make sure that I keep my tax deduction, but I, you know, make enough income to qualify for a loan? That makes, you know, that's what we have to do. Barb, all of our conservative, all of our numbers are very, very conservative on the beginning, because we want to keep the approval accurate. We want to make sure they stay approved. But also, if I tell someone their payment's $3,000 and then we open escrow and it's $3,200 and it's on a lower price, they're going to be so upset at that. And that's not a good thing. You don't want to drive people around, especially in this market, seeing 25 homes, writing 50 offers, and then find out that they're upset that I set the wrong expectation. So that's the way that we do it, is we go very conservative. Okay, real quick. This is going to have to be rapid fire because I got about 12 minutes. VA loans are for first-time buyers only. Yes or no? Nope. Good, Jillian. Nope, nope, nope. Good. Okay, so the only restriction, good job, you guys are smart. So not first-time buyers only. The only restriction is VA loan has to be used to purchase a primary residence. So it has to make sense that, and primary residence is occupying within 60 days. So that's why your rent backs can't be 60 days plus. They have to be less than 59 days or 59 days or less. But people can, well, I won't jump ahead. It has to be for a primary residence. No second homes, no rentals, except if you're refinancing a VA loan that you bought as a primary residence before and turned it into a rental. My client can have 2 VA loans at once. Rapid fire. Yes? No? Mixed bag? No? Yes? Woo, 50-50. Okay, you can. So if you have remaining eligibility, yeah, exactly. Guadalupe, that's correct. So if you have remaining eligibility, let's say I bought a house in Virginia, but I didn't use all my eligibility there. My loan limit there was 510, 400, and I only bought a house for 200,000. I've got that percentage of eligibility left that I can apply to the next place. You can have 2 or 3, and then you have to start either refinancing to free up the VA, or refinancing to free up the VA, or selling to free up the VA. Because the VA works like almost like a rechargeable battery. You use it, and then when you sell the property, it reverts back. Eligibility is 25% of the, well, Rosemary, that's a funky question. It's a very complex question. How much is eligibility per vet? They list it as 36,000, but that's based on some archaic figures. It's really, in reality, it's 25% of the, that's a hard question to answer. Think about it this way. They can do 0 down up to whatever they want, whatever they qualify for from an income standpoint. So the guarantee is 25% of whatever that is. And then after that, it changes a bit. Man, I'm going to get into the weeds if I'm trying not to get in the weeds. Jillian, an EARL is actually an IRRRL. It's an interest rate reduction refinance loan, and that's like a streamlined refi with no appraisal, no income requirements or anything like that. If they purchase a home with VA, then move to another city, can they rent their home here? Where they no, they can rent it out. Yeah, Austin, they can rent it out, no problem. So yeah, they can, and it's really like there's no real set solid guideline. You couldn't do that to a VA person. They buy a house, they live in it, they intended to live in it, and they got deployed to, you know, to Afghanistan or something. It's like they're renting their house out, you know, so that's totally fine. My client can buy a $1.5 million home in San Diego, use it with 0 down. Yes, you can. That's as of January 1st, full eligibility. There's no loan limit capped, which is crazy. I can buy a $1.25 million fourplex. Can you buy a fourplex? I'll just answer it. Yes, you can. So anything up to 4 units is considered residential. So what you can do is you can live in one, rent the other 3, and that satisfies the owner occupancy requirements. And that's, they call it like VA house hacking. And it's a very cool thing if you can find a property. But yeah, a lot of times they'll live in one, rent out the others, and they'll end up spending less. And so that's a really interesting strategy if you guys ever wanted to talk about that. I love it. My non-veteran spouse's income can be used to qualify. Absolutely. We talked about that. The spouse's income can be used as long as it's stable and everything. Same. There are certain circumstances where VA may not be the best option. Absolutely. So it's always about planning. It's always about, there's too many people and too many lenders that just say, hey, client, what do you want? Throw it against the wall and hope it sticks. It really should be a fundamental process of establishing what the most important elements of the goals are, and then building a plan to fit those goals. That's how you do it the right way. That's how you keep people happy and make sure that they don't fall out of escrow because they don't know how to structure the things the right way. So anyways, so if your client's buying a small temporary home, they may want to retain their VA for a bigger home later. So they may not want to use their VA right away. They may want to retain that. Or if your client is planning on putting 20% down anyways, and they have a funding fee if they go VA, they may not want to pay that funding fee because if they're putting 20% down, it may be very comparable. So in all cases, education and planning is key. The VA has what's called a funding fee. And sorry, I'm jamming through because I'm like a little bit short on time and I want to be really respectful, and then I can answer any questions. The VA has a funding fee. It's generally not paid in cash. It's rolled into the loan. So for example, this veteran with no down payment, and it's their first time use as opposed to being any use after that, their first time use, the VA funding fee is 2.3%. 2.3% of 100,000, let's say they buy, keep the math easy. They buy for 100,000 and 2.3%, the loan amount ends up 102,300. They just take the 2.3%, add it to the loan, and it's done. And that goes to VA to fund the program, basically. You can minimize that with down payment. We do strategically all the time, especially on subsequent use. It's a big drop at 5% down. So we talk about that quite a bit. But if your clients have, you always want to ask, if they have service-connected disability, it's waived. So service-connected disability waives, it's 0. When I bought my house in Carlsbad, I think I would have had probably like a $30,000 funding fee. I've got service-connected disability, it was 0. So you always want to kind of ask those things, and we certainly do. But if they're going through a bank that's unfamiliar with VA, you want to make sure that they don't pay a funding fee if they have service-connected disability. Okay, so I'm wrapping up pretty quick, so then I'll just get to questions. So other VA loan-specific concepts specifically for VA. There are things called non-allowables. This is confusing to a lot of people. A lot of listing agents think that the seller has to pay closing costs. They do not. There are things called non-allowable fees. Some escrow fees are non-allowable. Some title fees are non-allowable. They are not non-allowable unless those fees exceed 1% of the purchase price. So if you're doing a $500,000 loan, I don't know any escrow companies that charge more than $5,000 for an escrow fee. As long as they're under 1%, there are no non-allowable. So everything that we do, the way that we structure everything, your clients will never, and most lenders, I should be fair, your clients will never, ever have an issue where a seller has to pay the fees, and you can negotiate unpaid, but they're not required by VA. Just make sure you guys know that. If I charge a 1% origination fee, all of a sudden, all those escrow fees do exceed 1%, and then they're non-allowable. But as long as we don't charge a 1% origination fee, you want to be very careful of that. Then you won't be kind of, you know, kneecapped by making, you know, difficult negotiation where you feel like you have to have the seller pay your closing costs. So don't think the seller has to pay closing costs. And if you have any questions about that, let me know. VA is a residual income loan. They look at income taxes, maintenance costs, all that stuff. That stuff should all work itself out. This is not a thing that you need to know a ton about. It's a different type of loan, but generally that DTI is what we go by primarily, and then verify the residual income's good. They just have to have money to live on after the fact. Somebody's calling me. All right. And then condos have to be approved by VA. So VA condos have to be approved. So down below, I left the link. In most cases, VA condos don't expire. So if you look in the MLS and you see that there's been VA transactions in the past, it's very likely that it's VA approved, but I wouldn't leave it up to the listing agent to find that. If you go to this link below, and again, I'll send this out, but there's a list of condos. VA is terrible at organizing that list. So what I would do is I wouldn't be very specific about your search. I would just plug in the county that you're looking in and pull up all of them and then see what you can find in there, as opposed to being like, this is called Seabright. So Seabright is our, you know, and then VA typed Seabright wrong, so it doesn't come up even though it's approved. So that's what I would do about condos. If you have questions, let me know. Appraisals are a little bit different with VA. They're not more difficult. They're not more conservative. And now with conventional, we have to go through a third party anyways. So whether you go through VA and they order it, or we go through a third party management company and they order it, it's all third party. The one difference is a thing called Tidewater initiative. With a conventional loan, you order the appraisal. If it comes in low, it just comes in. It comes in and it's low. And then you can say, hey, you missed this comp, and have them renegotiate it or look at it and amend it if it's warranted. Tidewater is you order the appraisal, the appraiser goes out, and then they say, uh-oh, I'm not seeing comps for this place that justify this sales price. Tidewater, and they announce to everybody that this is happening. So I would go back to the listing agent and the buyer's agent and say, hey, what do you guys want to do? You have 48 hours to provide the comps that you want the appraiser to see. And that way, then they verify it, make sure that they got everything. And maybe it comes in and maybe it still comes in low, but at least you have an opportunity to kind of try and justify the price before the appraisal is finalized. And that can sometimes be difficult, again, in super appreciating markets with any appraisals, which I'm sure I've got an answer for Barb related to what we're seeing. You know, appraisers have to use sales a lot of times. They have to use sales. So if you've got people paying much more than the last sold price because the market's on fire, sometimes that's hard to do. Sometimes that makes it difficult. All right, so that's 10:59. So I'm going to just pull this screen up just so you have my contact. And also, I think NSDCR has all of it. I'll send out all that stuff. But if you have questions or need anything, just you can reach out. I think that's okay. And then any questions you have, I can hang out as long as, you know, anybody that wants to dip off can. But if you guys have questions or you want to hear the answers to questions, I'll just hang tight. Thanks, Ed. Okay. So let me jam through these real quick. Guadalupe, does it lose eligibility amount after you use it the first time? Yeah, so percentage-wise, in essence, it's very convoluted. There's a calculation that you can do based on remaining eligibility. So when we pull a certificate of eligibility, it'll show how much is already charged. And if the an eligibility that's already charged, we'll calculate the difference, apply it to the new loan limit in the county that they're buying, and we'll be able to calculate how much is remaining. But let's say, generally speaking, if you use 50% of it in a county, like you use half of the eligibility, you'll have half remaining applied to the next county's amount. So that's kind of funky, but yeah, it does lose eligibility. But if you sell it, it frees it up again. Are there triggers which would cause a condo community to fall off the list, reserves, all that stuff? Generally speaking, once it's approved, it's approved. One thing that could cause it to fall off the list is, let's say we order an appraisal, the appraiser goes out on the condo, it's approved, and then the appraiser finds out that it's in litigation or something, or that there's a fundamental problem. Sometimes the appraiser can bring that up and it'll get suspended if the VA finds out about it, they'll suspend it. So that's what would have to happen probably for it to come off. That's my understanding of it. But yeah, there's not many, it's not like FHA where you have to continually update it, or get it, reapproved. Rita, call me. You got my number. Just call me or email me and we can set up a time. No problem. So Austin, does the fourplex strategy allow for a higher approval amount considering the ability? Yeah. So think about debt to income ratio. If you think about debt to income ratio, Austin, remember you've got two means by which you can increase the amount that someone qualifies for. So let's say somebody buys a fourplex. We can increase income by showing rents on the other 3 units. So you've got your earned income that qualifies you for this in a single family, right? But if there's rental units, what you can do is you can use the rents from the other units at a rate of 75% of gross rent. So for every $1,000 in rent you get, we can use $750 to account for, I mean, that's typical, how lenders look at it. But we can increase income and therefore increase the amount they qualify for accordingly. But in those circumstances, it has to truly be separately metered units. It can't be like a granny flat or renting a room. It has to be separately metered units to be able to use that rental income. If there's not separately metered units, that doesn't mean you can't rent the granny flat. What that means is your earned income has to be sufficient to qualify for it. You can't use rental income on something if it's not truly a separate unit. Ed, thank you, my friend. Rita, absolutely. Call me anytime. You got it, buddy. Yeah, call me if you need anything. Or anybody wants to talk about any of this stuff or needs anything at all, let me know. And again, I'll follow up with slides. I don't know how many we got still 11 people. So if anybody has any questions, I don't know, Shirley, if you need to kick me out, cool. But I can answer questions as long as everybody needs. Do all units in the fourplex need to be occupied at the moment to verify numbers? They do not. They just have to, what we would do is we would order an appraisal. A lot of times too, people need to leave, right? So let me answer that better. What we do is we get a rent survey. So the appraisal does the value, but it also says for these units, here is a rental survey of these similar units in the area for those rents. And as long as we present rents that are within reason related to that rent survey, they'll let them use it. The one thing about VA that's funky is they won't let you, they'll let you offset the payment. They won't let you go above and beyond and increase everything. It'll only offset the payment, but generally that's sufficient. Anybody else? Anybody? Going once, going twice. Let's see what we got. 8. So yeah, Shirley, I'm not sure if anybody else has any questions or if you're still on.
If they have any more questions, they can just email you or give you a call at your contact number.
100%. Yeah. Thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it. If there's anything I can help with, let me know. And Shirley, thank you too.
Absolutely. Thank you, Daniel.
Okay. See you guys. Thanks again.